Welcome back, folks, to another episode of Business from the Bass Boat on the Serious Angler Network, powered by X2 Power. And guys, we've got a lot of cool stuff coming up. The Serious Angler Network in general, we've got a lot of big news in the coming weeks. Potentially, we've got to start, we've got a giveaway with our partners over at Rec Lending. That is going to be big. Need to basically, that'll be kind of an emergency show during the middle of the week, not on a Business from the Bass Boat episode that goes out Monday, but it's just going to be a breakdown of kind of what we have talked about previously with Rec Lending and some potentials to help folks out around the lending space right now. But I'm about to be headed down to Table Rock here in the next couple of weeks for the Toyota Series Championship. And I'm excited for that. We've got a couple of shows in the hopper because of that. So excited to kind of get some stuff done this week to have consistency through the next couple of weeks. But today's show is awesome. I mean, this is, as said multiple times, a big part of why I started a podcast in the first place with the folks over at BTL. And great friend of the show, Matt Pangrac, is going to come on and talk about a little bit about the opens and on Business from the Bass Boat, the aspect of talking numbers and that kind of a thing. We're going to break down what it costs to fish an open. We'll talk through the season, all of that. Obviously, Matt has been running the gauntlet of the opens the last couple of years. So without further ado, let's get Panger in. What's going on, Matt?
Not much. What's going on, Adam? Thanks for having me on the show again.
Absolutely, dude. It's always a blast having you on. Listen to your show, man, religiously and everything. And obviously this morning, this is being recorded in advance to next Monday. But news broke on our show last night, talking just wrap up fantasy fishing with our little group of guys with Boomer and Bailey and Andrew and all of our guys in that deal, and it dropped with Major League Fishing and all this kind of turmoil. But man, this morning, what's your take initially with this?
It's really interesting. It's a big change from what we kind of thought was going to happen in the direction MLF was going. It's real interesting, the about face that they did on the every fish counts, back to the 5 fish, back to the every fish counts. It's hard to believe we're 5 years in. And one of the things that I've done, and I would encourage those who are interested in this topic, there's really no commentary on it. Just go back to the 2019 and 2020 press releases and the way this thing was unrolled, and then compare it to the info that man, there's a lot of stuff that's changed with that organization over 4 years.
Yeah. I mean, that's the part when you don't have that consistency, gosh, it makes it so difficult as an angler to think through what you're fishing, how things keep changing strategy, like going back to that every fish format. To me, I don't know. It's just, I understand it. I see aspects, the benefits to some of it, but at the same time, like you just, the changing to me is what is bothersome. It's hard to follow, and it's hard to follow as a fan, and I can't imagine as an angler on the flip side.
Yeah, you have to kind of take into account a couple factors as to why things are changing. Is it changing because they think it's going to create a better product? Are they changing because there's pressure from key individuals, sponsors, perhaps high-level anglers who want to, like, what is the catalyst for the change? And I think that's why it's kind of hard to wrap your head around it, because you can't really point your finger on, okay, they're changing this because of this, or this is what's happening because of this. It just seems like a lot of changes. I know in the beginning, especially in 19, this was all about angler run. Anglers make the decisions. I mean, hell, they voted for no entry fees in that first year. Now, obviously that's changed. And it'll be interesting to see how many of the decisions between what went out yesterday and what actually happens in 2025 will be implemented. Or basically, I'll wrap it up with this, Adam. I think you're going to have an opportunity to see how much power and control group of anglers actually can have on a tournament organization when they band together.
It's got my mind spinning, man. Like, The part, and this was a boomer made a good point last night when we were talking through this, as far as you're saying, like, why, right? Like, you got to
Yeah.
ask why in the change, or like, what's the thought process here? But he's like, hey man, it's pretty simple. Like, if, and this is speculation, right? Like, no, 100% here, but they say,
Mhm.
right, in the release, that there's struggling with viewership, but he's like, if things are working, things don't change. I'm like, that's a valid point. Like, there's
Yeah.
an idea to like change stuff to make it better, but if it works, you stay with it.
Yeah, you're 17 years into the Elite Series. That thing started in 2006, and if you saw what Bass did, I mean, every 4 or 5 years they'd have they'd have invitationals, they'd have top 150s, they have the E50s, they throw a bunch of stuff in. But when they kind of hit that magic in 06 with the Elite Series, yeah, there's been tweaks. We've had majors come and go. We've had number of anglers. We've had it, but as a whole, like, that's been the longest consistent stable trail in the history of professional fishing. Called the same thing, kind of the same format. You qualify for it through the same ways, etc.
Right.
It's working.
Right. It stayed the same. It is what it is. So no, I don't know. I think that's man. It's obviously, there's already been anglers upset and posting things or comments that you see from actual players in the game, and so it's man, a crazy time in the fishing industry, and just the part I still can't figure out, and maybe it's just out of trying to get ahead of the cart on things, but it's like, I don't know the last time I've seen a release, Matt, where it was like, not just, hey, here's what we're doing next year in 2024, but also what's going to happen in 2025.
Yeah, a lot of the schedules and rules that would affect scheduling have to be done more than a year in advance, because if you have a contract with that city, so like, let's say MLF has a contract with I don't know, Austin, Texas.
Okay.
And they did a contract for X amount of dollars to bring Major League Fishing here. And they're saying X number of dollars, we're going to have 80 guys that are coming in that are all spending 6 nights in a hotel rooms and this much in gas and this much in gas. And they do that deal. Well, then they can't, that's done in 23. If they're going to go there in 24, they can't just say, oh, never mind, we're going to bring in $250,000 less in fuel, and these guys are going to be, there's only going to be 50 guys instead of 80 guys and all this, because that completely changes all those contractual obligations that they sign when they sign that. So you have to do it kind of in advance, so then the cities that you're working with for 25 know what they're getting. Same thing with the Opens. That's the same way that the Opens works, when you're like, well, why can't we just arbitrarily change off limits and practice and stuff for the Opens? Because this stuff is planned a couple years out. So you can't just tell the city, hey, we got 7,500 less rooms now because we just cut practice in half.
Right. That's a good point, as far as just there's other factors at play here than just the anglers involved in the organization.
Yep.
Yeah, well, dude, I mean, you were open about it, and talking through, just as far as in your 2023 Bassmaster EQ season, you did not make the final trip down to Florida on the last event. Talk a little bit through your mindset and what was going on there.
That was more just like a pride deal. If you look at it, I mean, obviously you had a chance to win to get into the Tulsa Classic, which, I mean, you never know. You had I think that kid who won was from Kentucky. He'd won a college tournament there before too. But I mean, you never know when it's going to be your time. But I was looking at the odds. I had a charity event up in Minnesota that I was at that week. It would have required me to drive to Florida, then fly to Minnesota, then fish a tournament without any of my gear, miss practice in Minnesota, then fly back, miss 2.5 days of practice in Florida, then pick my stuff up, practice for half a day, and then fish the Harris chain, which is 9 different lakes. I knew Andrew wasn't going, so then I'd have lodging by myself. I knew it was a 1,300-mile drive there, so I'm 2,600. I just looked at it and I was like, man, I could save almost $5,000. And really the only thing I'm missing is I was 40th in the points, and I knew I'd probably drop to that 50th. And I was like, you know what? I'll take that pride hit and I'll swallow it to save the money and to spend the time up in Minnesota. And I think in all honesty, if you look at those Bassmaster Opens, there's 2 winners. The guys who fish either one division or all of them and win an event and get into the Bassmaster Classic,
Right.
Like Joey Nania this year when he won, he did not make the Elite Series. To me, that's still a win. I mean, you're in the Classic. If you win the Classic, then you still have a path to the Elite Series. Or the guys who finish in the top 9 or the top 10. Outside of that, everyone else, in my opinion, is not a successful season on the Bassmaster Opens. Yeah, you can make a little bit of money. It just gets you through to the next one. But there are 2 goals: Classic and EQ. And if you don't, it's a failure. And that's funny that I am actually saying that because I spend so much. But that is, I mean, you either do it or you don't. If you're 11th, I mean, ask Bobby Lane. I'm sure he wouldn't consider 11th place a success this year in the Opens.
Right.
And I knew that I had no chance of moving up into the top 10. And with the lack of practice and the money, slim to none chance of winning that event. So why am I going then? So that's why I decided that. It was just strictly a financial decision.
Right. Well, it's interesting to hear your mindset right on the here's winning, here's the failure side of the Bassmaster Opens. And I remember, like, back in the day, man, as far as listening to you and Jeffries go back and forth, right? Like the conversation of what is a failure, what is not a failure, like, and there's learning and there's so much that goes into that, like, whatever place finish that is still beneficial down the road. But as far as like where you're at, you're like, look, here's what it is. Here's a failure. Here's a winner in this situation in your head right now.
Yeah. And in my head now, you could have a very productive year. You can learn a lot. You can make great contacts. You can have a good time. You can enjoy your quality of life. But when it comes down to that result, when you're in the Opens, there is a very fine line a very distinct line to me of success or failure. And it's qualifying for the Elite Series or winning an event and making the Bassmaster Classic, and anything else is a failure. That's a little bit of a change, but I'm 5 years in on it now and I'm seeing it. And I'm kind of, I feel like I'm a little bit, have to have higher expectations for myself.
Right. Like, and that's what's, I think, something that's interesting. I think through this with life in general, but especially in the fishing world, like my viewpoint on how I want to fish tournaments and what I want to do, like it's okay to have those changing viewpoints, right? Like as you go through this, it's like, man, what works for you? What do you want to do? And what level do you hold yourself accountable to? Right. And it's like when you go and fish a local tournament, it's like, man, I feel like I need to be at a potential to win, or however that, as you progress as an angler and grow. But I mean, that you're exactly right. As far as financially in the Bassmaster Opens, like that's the kicker to me with all of this, is to have an actual winning season. It is extremely low odds when it comes down to it.
Yeah, you need either multiple top 10s or a first or second place. And I mean, really, other than that, even if you're not top 10ing tournaments, you're barely breaking even on certain events, and you're losing money on the majority, even that with a check cash.
Right.
And it's hard to cash a check in that way. You're talking top 40, like, okay, they average about a 210 boat tournament, and you're paying the top 40 out of 210 regardless. Even if it's 120 boats, they still pay the top 40. So that's like a 1 in 3, which kind of makes sense. Typically at that level, you're looking at a 1 in 4. You get in the Opens with a full field, it's like 1 in 6.2, which is by far the lowest like return on angler
number of spots paid,
angler per check. And I mean, I've gone around and around with Bass with it. I hope that there's a chance that they might change it this year. But like at the Toyota series, like what you fish, the number paid back is dependent on the number of entry fees,
right? Which
is the way it always is. Like if you go to a Wednesday nighter and there's 5 boats, you pay back 1 spot. If there's 10 boats, you pay back 2 spots, 15 boats, 3 spots. And I've never understood why Bass can't pay out a graduating scale like that. So if there's 230 boats, you're paying 65 or 70 spots. And if there's 180 boats, then you're paying 40 spots. Like it doesn't, I don't really understand why.
But the number goes up, right? As far as like, if there's 225 boats, 40th place check is not
it's $3,400 as opposed to 2,300 if there's 170 guys in it. So just the amount of the check changes.
Right. Yeah, well, it's a good point on the Toyota series. I fished the Western Toyota series this last year, on the pro side, and it's kind of like this. It's the same deal, right? Like when you have a field of 90 boats or 70 boats, right out west. There's no secret there. The Toyota Series have had a hard time drawing boats, and then you compare the payouts to Gunnersville, right? Like the Central Toyota is like, holy cow, they get a ton of boats, and that paycheck is completely different, and it pays like I think you had to finish in a lot of the Western Toyotas to cast a check this year. You need to be in like 17th, 18th place, something in there, because that's it, it prorates to the field.
Yep. That's to me has always been, I'm sure Bass has a reason for it. They're actually really good about kind of listening to the anglers. And I will say Bass in the Opens did a great job of sending out questionnaires. They did like a Thursday email every single week to where they kind of kept up to date on what's going on as far as like the numbers, the how many people were reaching, where you can get your photos downloaded. It was really good communication. And
really?
then a questionnaire at the end of the year too, that talked about practice days, forward facing sonar, payouts, everything. Like, I mean, it had all of the hot button issues that we were all able to kind of give our feedback on. So I give Bass a lot of props for that.
Yeah. Well, that's great to hear. And one thing I've always thought, and it's like you have to have at some point, the organization obviously has to be successful, make their own decisions. But I've noticed that a little bit this last year, the new, obviously there's been a ton of drama out west, and the BAM tour coming out, but Mark has done a good job with that as far as like, man, I've looked at a lot of surveys on things on what they're looking to do, but it's been a lot of like, hey, let's try and get the angler's opinion on this. And I think there's a balance there. You can't just take, because everyone's going to like, bitch and moan about things, right? Like we're anglers. There's always going to be unhappy people, but at least
I was bitching and moaning to Bass about stuff yesterday. Literally. I was like, man, I hope I didn't come off too hard on that over stuff in the Opens. And I was like, I'm one of the freaking guys. I mean, I'm part of the solution and part of the problem.
Exactly. Like being a tournament director is bottom of like my mindset of a career, because dude, they deal with it was
like, hey man, how's it going? And I was like, oh, you want to know how it's going here? This. And he's like, dude, I got to take this other call. I'll call you right back. Never heard back. I was like, I think I might've gone a little too hard.
Oh man. Yeah, it's exactly like, it is the nature of it. And it's tough, dude, in the fishing industry as it is in general. But dude, let's get into your 2023 Bassmaster Open season. Obviously I've got your kind of season pulled up here in 2023. And I've always known you as a guy who, like, dude, when you have your fall swing, you seem to have some good success when it's at grinder derbies in the fall, where that's kind of like, you always have that potential bump on the tail end of your season, right? As far as things go. I guess, what's your overall gut feel on your season in 2023 for yourself? What kind of rating would you give yourself?
I mean, I give myself like a C- on this year, because I look back over the past years and I've either been really close to making it or had the opportunities to make it. And I never got the bites to even put me in contention this year. I salvaged the first one. Like, okay, here's the formula. I believe that success, and I haven't focused much on it. Next year I'm focusing really on it. The first 3 Opens are just absolutely critical as far as getting off the board when you're fishing for points. And you look at what Ben Milliken did, a first and a fifth. I think JT Tompkins had maybe one of his lowest, but it was still only like a 38th or something like that in his first. You could go through all of the 9 guys who qualified for it, and it's amazing to see how consistent they were in the first quarter of the season. And it's just like a baseball game with 162 games where you get 2 points for the win and 162 as you do at 1. But when it comes to the fishing, if you can set yourself up in the top in the first quarter of the year, it is then beneficial to fish for 50th and 60th place finishes, because you have your foundation set already. And a 2-pounder, when you've got 4 fish with an hour left, 4 tournaments in, keeps you up there. But if you're trying to make up ground, you don't make up any ground at it. Like if you have a first, a fifth, a 20th, and then a 70th, that 70th is really good. If you have a 70th, a 140th, a 30th, and then a 70th, that 70th just puts you further behind the 8-ball. So I think you have to focus really hard on those earlier tournaments to have high results, because then the 10.5 to 12 pound limits that I'm really good at, I've done it 21 days in a row. Then they mean something, because then you can ride that momentum. It's a lot easier to find those 10 to 12 pound patterns than it is to find the 20 to 25 pound patterns. And then while you're trying to fish for comeback bags, you then put yourself at risk for more bombs.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're 100% out of it. And that's kind of what happened this year. I kind of pushed and kept trying to find stuff and was never able to find those bigger bags. Especially after I got 5 each day. But I wasn't an F, because I weighed in a limit every single day of the season this year in the 8 events that I fished, which, I mean, I'm proud of that.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I mean, dude, I think the overwhelming thing for me of the opens of this year is like that top 10 group of anglers. I mean, just a freaking incredible season.
42.5 points. 42.5 place finish. 42nd place finish is the easiest way to say that.
Is where you had to average.
Just to make the Elite Series. So Kyle Patrick did.
Because in my head, I have always been under the viewpoint. Like with me fishing the Toyota Series on the boater side, it's like if I come in with a limit every day of every event, like you did yourself, in my head, that has always been like, I'll make the championship.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just is what it is. And it's like to see that is not acceptable, right? Like to even that's incredible to me, the caliber or the level of that top group, how they're fishing.
Yeah. A limit was nothing. It was just a starting point. Now, granted, I don't think it's ever happened before, but I think I had the smallest 5 bass limit in the tournament in 3 of the 8 tournaments that I fished. I'm not kidding. I know for a fact I had the smallest 5 bass limit at Toledo Bend.
What did it weigh?
I had like an 8-pound, 3-ounce 5 bass limit at Toledo Bend in April. Like, you know how hard that is to do?
That's yeah. Listen, there should be.
It's actually hard to do. And I think I had the smallest 5 bass limit at Watts Bar. It was like 8.5. That's a 15-inch limit, mind you.
Oh my gosh. Talk about some skinny fish. Holy cow.
Yep. And then I 100% had the smallest 5 bass limit at Eufaula in Oklahoma. It was a 14-inch limit, and I had like an 8.1 for 5 for 14. So, I mean, that's awful. That's like what most people catch, 3 for 8, but it's just 5. So the optics look different, but it's like coming in with 2 nice fish. It's just 5. So, I mean, the odds are out of 200 to 3 times this year have the smallest 5 bass limit in the entire field. And here's the jacked up part. Toledo Bend was on a 3/4 ounce spinnerbait on cypress trees. Not a single spinning rod involved.
Jeez.
Lake Eufaula was a 10-inch worm, and I did throw a spinning rod a little bit just to fill out a limit there. But then Watts Bar was punching 3/4 ounce, and a BFE was 65-pound test braid and a 7.6 rod. So it's not like they're like, oh yeah, well, Pangrac always finesse fishes.
Deakin
2 of those are on like the most Bubba stuff you could freaking have.
Oh, the amount, like, to me, if I'm swinging, especially in your neck of the woods in Oklahoma, it's like, dude, if I've got a 3/4 ounce spinnerbait in my hand, like I'm getting a 3 or 4 pound bite. Like something's gonna, like, there's gonna be a good bite. And then same deal, like my punching experience is pretty much limited to Rayburn and then the Delta quite a bit. And it's like, dude, at the Delta, you do catch like it's like a Florida, right? It's very healthy fishery. There's a lot of small fish as you're going along. But like throughout the day, if you have that punching rod in your hand, like you're gonna get a big bite, like at some point during the day.
But I mean, I fished the cleanest that I fished out of 5 years of doing this. Like I think I fished clean in 6 of the 8 events.
That's a win, dude. That's
and
huge.
Ironically, the one that I fished the worst in execution wise was Thousand Islands, and I was in the top. I mean, I wasn't going to catch Jody White, but I mean, I was easily top 10 there. I had some bizarre stuff happen. Like I had like a 6-pounder in my hand, like literally in my hand, a 1/6, and the line breaks like 2 foot up above while it's in my hand and I'm down, and I like toss my rod in the water over my shoulder and grab it like a football, and I've got it. and he like squirts out of my hands, but he came out of 50 foot of water. So he's upside down and the currents drifted me back and the fish is just slowly drifting away from me as I'm leaning over in the water, like with my hands touching its tail. And then it slowly just like sunk out of sight. And I weighed in a 290 that day. And, I stood up and I was like, what happened? And my co was like, your line broke, dude. I guess I'd had like a zebra mussel. I'd gotten snagged and popped a heavy Ned. And he's like, I was like, what happened? He's like, your line popped. You said, oh, bleep. You chucked your rod in the water over your shoulder. And then you went in after it. Cause I was like, where's my rod? And he's like, oh, dude, you threw that in the lake like a long time ago. And I was like, really? So I lost a rotted reel and a 6.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Yeah,
That is
but I mean, like I had it, like it was there, but like the kind where you get, and then the harder you squeeze, it kind of shot out of my, it was bad.
Slipped right out.
But other than that, I fished freaking clean, man. And I power fished. I just caught little babies and didn't ever have any big bites.
Gotcha. Dang, man. That's a hilarious story. I mean, not funny for you, but that is, that sucks. And
yeah,
man, it would be like if that was right during an Elite Series events or somewhere it was live, like that would be played over and over.
Yeah,
and over
no, it was 100% one of those.
Oh man. Well, dude, so I guess 2023 season C-, you said. Some wins for you were the fishing clean, power stuff to me, like, right? Like your whole thing has always been the BR squared pattern, right? Like that's something that you always
Bridges,
have.
Marina, rip, wrap, and ramps with the dink and dunk, drop shot, wacky worm, Ned rig, shaky head, that type of stuff.
Right. And so to kind of mix it up, obviously that stuff you're still including throughout the season, you have to. But you were able to kind of throw some big stuff and give yourself a chance at some big bites. I mean, those are all positive things. And let's kind of transition here into what you look at, like obviously season wise, right? You cashed a check at St. Lawrence, Bugs Island.
That was it.
And that was it.
Yeah, 2 out of the 8, and then I was close in 2 of the others.
Right, and that's the hard part for me is like looking at this and seeing a 58 and a 60th place finish, Watts Bar and Ozarks. It's like those are great finishes.
Yeah, and a 46 to start the year.
Right. It's just, I mean, like bomb there for sure was Toledo. That was that one hurt.
And that was early in the year, which put me behind the 8 ball. So I mean, in all honesty, if you're looking at what you should have done, what I should have done financially. If I'm looking at this strictly financially,
okay,
the smart play is you go to Bugs because you never know what's going to happen. I had a good event at Bugs, but then after that next event should have been done. If you're looking at it strictly financially, 4 out of the 9 done. I have 2 low finishes, 140th. My average isn't going to be able to get out. What are the odds that I'm going to go 4 top 5s in a row based on history? Not good. Cut my losses, eat the deposits, try it again next year.
So that is an interesting point that you bring up, Matt, because I have been taking my mindset in the fishing world and relating it back to there's these books, and I've listened to these podcasts on people talking about like living life in odds, right? Like you listen to professional poker players and they live their life this way, like thinking through like, hey, what are the odds that I get into that parking spot? What are the odds of this? And it's like, do you see, I mean, you see that obviously you see a tail end of the EQ qualifiers throughout the season as we get into those last couple events. The guys who haven't done it, like there's some guys who are like, man, I'm here to learn. I'm going to fish all of them. And I like, so there's the benefit of that side.
And I'm here to learn. You never stop learning. Never. Once you stop learning is when you're screwed.
Right. But in your head, you're saying like if you're strictly financial,
right, based
on previous years.
I can learn in Oklahoma. I'm looking at it at this point. Like I understand how the tournament works. I understand how to travel. I understand how to fish tournaments at that level. Now my focus for the rest of the year is going to be cost-effective learning. Like if I'm going to spend $4,000, is there a more cost-effective learning way? Could I learn more? I mean, that's an entire trip to maybe a fishery that I've never been to. That's 4 local tournaments as opposed to 3 practice days and 2 days of an open where you're trying to make something work to try to get back in something that you're really out of. So then you look at that as cost-effective learning. Could I become a much better angler instead of maybe a little bit better angler by actually dropping out and doing something different?
Right. I mean, dude, that's a really interesting concept to me. And I think there's a lot of merit in that, because it's like same deal. If you're wanting to get better at scoping or whatever it is, and it's like, what's the best time of the year, best places to go and learn how to do this, that trip is a lot more cost effective than driving to Florida to go fish a tournament that's going to cost you X amount of dollars and all this travel and entry fee and all that.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably my biggest thing is when I've got guys that say, man, you think I should fish the Toyotas or the Opens or whatever? And they're not seasoned tournament guys, for lack of a better term. And they're like, I'm trying to learn and get better. If you're trying to learn and get better, like as you're getting into it, traveling across the country, spending days traveling, fishing bodies of water that you don't know on $1,500 to $2,000 entry fees is a disservice to your learning. Because I mean, I'm in Oklahoma. There's 50 bodies of water within 3 hours that I could get on here that I don't know. So you can't say, well, I don't know that lake. Well, you can get on bodies of water that you hate or don't know around you and do the same thing. You can spend 10 times the amount of time on the water, on bodies of water and fisheries next to you. I mean, what are you learning? How to drive across country, I guess. I mean, that's something you can kind of do on the job training. But you could fish for one division of the Opens, you could fish 3 divisions of the BFLs, get 5 times as many tournaments on the exact same amount of money, and get so many more reps and so many more days on the water and so much more practice in, and be such a better angler by the end of that than 6 days of competition in the Opens, 14 days of travel, and 3 times 12 days of practice. Like, to me, that makes sense, way more sense if you're just trying to get in it and start to learn.
Right. Dude, and I think there's a lot of that as we see kind of the economy. Obviously, there's issues there. There has been, fuel prices are high. That is like, I wonder if more decisions like that we'll see in the future. And there's been a lot of talk of like, okay, well, how obviously the Opens field was massive this year, but then you see this stuff happen with Major League Fishing, and it's like there's a lot of guys that are at that touring level already. And so it's interesting because you kind of have to look at your own situation, your own financial backing, your own sponsorship, whatever it is that makes you do things, and also what potentially those sponsors are looking to have out of you in those situations. But it's like everyone is going to have their own specific route in this, and I think it's wise to look at different ways to do things, because it can certainly save you some money and build your experience on the back end.
Yeah, and I mean, the crazy thing is how many guys who have been there and done that are professional. They're professional anglers. They fished the FLW Tour for years, or the Invitationals. They've been on the Elite Series before. They've been on the BPT before. Not a single one of those guys qualified this year. And there were like 50 of them in the field. It was mind-blowing. Not a single one. Bobby Lane, obviously closest in 11th.
But and he openly talks about how it's the hardest thing he has done. Like,
that blows my mind. You would think that I would have thought that there would have been a number of those guys that would have strung together 9 really solid tournaments, just knowing how hard it is. And
right. Well, I mean, look at like years past, right? Like when you saw Christie, Swindle, Hackney, like in those Opens rounds,
Iconelli, Scott Martin,
like
Jacob Perosnik.
We're used to this like shoe in, right, of those guys, and that has changed.
Yeah, it's an interesting group this year, and it will be extremely interesting next year, especially with the MLF changes, with the registration coming up. It's just the discrepancy in like the payout with the same travel. Like, it's so hard, and I have to give Bobby Lane and Ish a lot of credit for having a big enough pair to leave what they left and what they were fishing for the chance to go back to bass, knowing that, hey, I could be stuck here for 5 freaking years fishing for $2,000 and no TV and nothing. I mean, it's a pay to play league that they're going from. They're going from decades at the top on the Elite Series and the BPT, qualifying for $300,000 championships, no entry fee, $100,000 heavy hitters, $100,000 each tournament, $10,000 if you're in the top half, no co-anglers, 80 to 100-man field, to here, pony up your $180, you got a co-angler, and now you're fishing for 2,000.
It's true, dude. That is the absolute truth. And I think that's why you've seen maybe some folks who have openly come out and said, I want to be somewhere else, but it's like financially, you're kind of, your hands are tired, right? Like when you're talking about leaving a steady, potentially steady paycheck to really unsteady, like those decisions, you change.
Yeah,
man. Well, dude, let's break into, I know we're going to basically prep some stuff on the back end of the costs of an event for you, or how your head breaks down, so we're talking what, 2024.
Yeah.
We talked a little off air, first event of the season.
Yeah. So I figured the best way to do this would just be to like break down what it's going to cost for me at Okeechobee.
Right.
And I think what I've noticed for a lot of the years, there's a lot of expenses up front for that first event of the year that people don't take into account. And then you get behind already. So you're already talking about, at least for me, $1,200 for boat insurance for the year. If I have a new boat, I'm going new ropes, new anchors, new safety flares, new set of screwdrivers, ratchets, that type of stuff, zip ties that are, if those have rusted. So, I mean, you're already in, before you've even done anything, $2,000 just on that stuff, just to get ready to go.
And you're including the $1,200 boat insurance in that $2,000.
Yeah,
as far as startup for the year.
Yes, that's the startup for the year. $2,000. Then you have to, when you're doing it, what I have found for the opens is you always want to add more because it's never less. Does that make sense?
Right.
I'm sure you've experienced that in the Toyota series, like bar none. You're like, all right, this should not cost me more than $2,000. And then you're like, what the hell? Practice just ended. I'm already $1,900 in. Like, what the hell?
Right. In California gas prices, right? Like
in California gas prices. So I always start with, if I know that I'm going to spend it, it's not going to stress me out.
Okay.
So that's why I like to have a number, or even if it's just a rough number. This is going to be a $4,000 trip. This is a $3,000 trip. That way I know that money doesn't exist. To me, it'd be like poker money. Like, you don't sit down at the poker table, and once you've cashed your money in for chips, you can't look at that as actual money. You have to look at that as, hey, I'm playing with this right now. And then it's real money when I get it back, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, like that's the money. It's the cost that's already there. You're taking it off the top.
So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to play poker 9 times. I'm going to figure out how much I'm going to buy in for each one. So you have your fixed expenses. You're like, so fixed expenses for Okeechobee in Florida, it's going to be $60 for a fishing license for a week. It's going to be $1,800 for that tournament. Now, that's not all going to be at once. You're going to have to pay $800 of it in November, and then $1,000 of it 30 days before, when you're getting all that. So really, it kind of feels like $1,000.
So that 800. Sorry to get to your point on what you're talking as far as going back to the financial feasibility after your first couple events, see where you're at. So that 800 is due for all the events.
7,200 right up front. Once you pay, that puts the deposit in. If you drop out after 8, you don't get the 800 back. If you drop out after 4, you don't get the 800 for the remaining 5 back. That money is in there. And then 30 days before each event, you pay $1,000. And then that makes you paid in full. You get a text. It's really depressing when you're at an event hemorrhaging money, and then you get the text that's like, your $1,000 for the tournament in 30 days is due today. And you're on the water with your credit card typing in for the next 1,000, and then boom, you just dropped another K. Right. Man. So like during that Okeechobee event, I believe the $1,000 for the Santee Cooper event will be due because that's a month later. So I'll have $1,000 for that too.
Like,
And I mean, this is all stuff that drops off. Then, so I'm looking at I always get on MapQuest and I just do a
You're
total.
a MapQuest guy, Panger, not a Google Maps guy.
No, just to get it through. So I'm 1374 from Shawnee to Clewiston, which is where this event is. So right. I'm going to round that up to 1400. Then I'm going to double it. So I know I'm 2,800 miles in. Then you also have to remember Okeechobee's big. So now I'm going to add 200 miles in travel just to and from ramps, because you'll spend an entire tank of gas sometimes at ramps. And
in
that's
your
an
week
extra
of practice.
Yeah, that's an extra $100. So I'm 3,000 miles in. I know I get 13 miles to the gallon. I'm going to look up that the average in Florida. I'm going to go through Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, and Arkansas. So I'm going to be at right now estimated 350 a gallon.
Okay.
I'm going to multiply all that. I'm going to figure out how much that takes. So I'm going to do 3,000 divided by 13, which is what I get when I'm towing here. I'll do it right now.
Okay.
This is just basic math here, but we got to get a number here.
We got to get the full number.
Which means I'm going to go through 230 gallons times 350, which means I'm at $800 just in truck fuel.
Yeah, not
get there and back. So depending on how low you are, you want to make sure, like, hey, I make sure I have 400 cash with me, because then at least I'll be able to get home. There's guys who've had issues with that. Not me. I mean, but I have in the past. I mean, it has been in the past where I'm like, whew, it worked. But so there's 800 just in truck gas to get there.
Yep.
Then each day I estimate that I run 20 gallons of gas. That is roughly a half a tank of gas each day. There'll be days that I run more. There'll be days that I run less. But each practice day over the past 5 years, I've averaged 20 gallons of gas.
Got it.
So that's going to be five practice days: Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
You said 350 for gas.
Right? 2 tournament days.
Okay.
Which I don't do the third one, because if I make it to the third one, I'm getting paid. At least $6,000. So that's all bonus. So I just throw it in for 7 days. So 7 times 20 would be 140 gallons times 350. So that's $500 just in boat gas. So now I'm $1,400 in just in fuel.
Yep.
What I have found when you're staying places, $50 a night doesn't cut it anymore. It's like $60 a night if you want to do cheap. But if you want to split with someone, you can go as much as you want on VRBOs. I room with Andrew Upshaw and did room some with Joe LaBarbera this year. But $60 a night, typically I'll try to stretch an extra night, get in on Saturday. So I practice all day Saturday. So I have Saturday night, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then check out on Friday. So 6 nights. In Florida, it's going to be 8 nights, because I'm going to have to stop halfway because it is a 20-hour drive. So 8 nights times 60 is $500 in lodging. So there's $1,900 just in lodging and fuel. So I'm $1,900 in on that. I'm $1,800 in on the entry fee. So we haven't made a single cast. We haven't gotten anything ready. We haven't stayed anywhere. We don't have a place to stay yet. And I'm $4,000 in on this thing.
Well, we had lodging, right? We have lodging in there at $60.
Oh, yeah, $60 deal.
Night.
So 1,800 night. So 1,800 plus 1,900 is
just under $4,000.
Just under $4,000. All right. Then you're down in Florida. So what are you going to do? You're going to stop at Roland and Marianne Martin's Marina, and there's going to be speed worms, and then you're going to need Charlie's worms, and you're going to need all that. So this is where it varies based on specialty and based on your sponsors.
Right.
But as a whole, $250 does not cover it in tackle. I spent $700 at a tackle store on stuff for Eufaula in Oklahoma, where I am from, on buzz baits and square bills. And then there was a swim bait there that was $200 that I really liked. So really I spent $500. If you're at this level too, you're going to want to have what you need at each one, because hell, you're already $4,000 in. So you're not going to skimp on this. So I do 500 tackle.
Right.
That could be, hey, I'm going to stop in Memphis and spend 100. That's like 10 packs of hooks. There's a quick 100.
Oh yeah.
The tackle gets you on all these places.
Totally, dude. And that's something like I have seemed to slim down a little bit on. So it's like college fishing, like, gosh, I would just walk into a tackle store and just like, oh, I'm at Toledo Bend. Like, here's what works here. I whatever it is, I'm going to buy. It's the summer and I'm buying a bunch of 8XDs and 10XDs because that's what they do here. Right. And it's like, I've never had
$18 a pop.
Right.
$9 a pop, whatever it is.
Dude, the tackle store locally is like, it's good for those tackle stores to have these derbies come by. Like,
but I give myself 500 tackle for every event.
I like it.
That if I've earmarked it for that, I don't feel like I'm a complete degenerate walking out of there with $300 or $400. And I feel good about myself because now I'm saving myself money if I go and I'm like, dude, I only need a couple packs of these June bug worms. I got everything else.
Right.
Now I'm saving money based on it, but I give myself $500 for tackle.
Okay.
Did we have a total for what I was in before that? Like, it was like $2,000 for fishing license and all that stuff and everything.
We had $2,000 for startup costs. Then we had, the
1,800
entry fee.
1,900.
Yep.
500.
Yep.
Yeah. And then I do $20 a day for boat gas and snacks. Now that can be distributed with, you go to Costco and spend $150 before you go. And you have the flats of water, the beef jerky. That could be $20 every morning at the gas station, but $20 a day flat. That'll get you a couple bags of ice, some candy bars, and some waters. Yep. And that's 7 days.
So 20 times 7 there,
140. And that's just in that. Then, this is what we didn't do. We didn't do food. Food. And I do $50 a day food, because what's going to happen is you're going to be on your budget and your buddy's going to go, let's go to Longhorn Steakhouse. And what are you going to say? Sorry, I'm on a budget of ramen. And no, you're going to go to Longhorn. It's been a long day on the water. You're going to get a 22-ounce beer. You're going to get a freaking prime rib, and it's going to be a $50 bill just for you.
Yep.
Just in that one day.
Yep.
So I do $50 a day flat for food. So there's another $500 for food. Yeah. So now what are we at? This is just the first event at Okeechobee. And I feel like I've been reasonable. Have I been reasonable, Adam?
Yeah, dude, you have. I think obviously one to take into account that, like, food, right? Like, you're probably going to be, whether you're at home or at a tournament, you're spending money on food. So like, that's one, I think it's important to have in here, because you are going to spend more on the road than you are at home, but like, that's going to be a sunk cost no matter where you are, you're going to have to. But so like right now we're at least my numbers, we've got 4,000 roughly, 2,000. That's the 2,000 is the start for the year, right? That's the one time. So, but still it's going to be your first tournament here. We're at $6,600 right now, $6,500 in a total with that startup cost, with the food. That's kind of what I'm looking at. Yeah. Is that right?
Yes. That's insane, dude.
And that's reasonable. Like, I'm not saying you're not staying at some super nice place. You're not like, you're not going truck bed living out of nothing, but you're also a pretty average tournament guy, I'd say.
And then listen, you're going to get the guys there too. Well, you have to do truck depreciation. You have to do oil change. And what if you have a 2-stroke? And what about the tolls? And then you have to throw, like, there's a bunch of stuff. I'm just talking about the stuff that you're actually going to see right there out of your pocket, that you need that amount of cash to get going. So before, I'm one event in, and you're sitting there going, oh, $16,200, $1,800 a tournament. Like, that's manageable. But listen, let's say you have a sponsor that pays you $10,000 to fish the opens, $10,000.
Yeah.
That's a freaking great deal. You're one of 180 guys. They pay to wrap your boat. They give you 10 grand cash at the start of the freaking year.
Mm-hmm.
You're great. Now, don't forget, you also have the $1,000 that is due during that event in Florida for the upcoming event on Santee Cooper that's 30 days away. So now you're $7,500 in instead of 65.
Mm-hmm.
So now by the end of that first week in Florida, you have 8 more of these things. You get home out of that $10,000 sponsorship, you have $2,500 left of it. And you fished one event so far.
Yeah. Talk about, and then not to mention, if you end up getting to a point, you're a couple events in and you're like, hey, this isn't working. And it's financially draining, mentally, whatever, all this stuff. That sponsor was expecting you to fish the entire season, or, ideally, right, if they're going to be doing that. So then it's like, oh boy, got to have a tough conversation here. So yeah.
Anyway, man. I figured, so it's easy to say the numbers and to say it, but every time, like, I always have a little bit of a shell shock when I go through every year and I start plugging it in. So when you were like, hey, you want to come on and do it? I was like, let's just freaking do it on the show.
Yeah. No, dude, I think it's a great idea. And to talk through it live, and man, to keep the thing that keeps going through my head through all of this, I like your approach of dedicated learning in the future, financially responsible learning in the future. So, question for you, big picture, and I hope that your first 3 opens go off with an absolute bang.
Yeah.
In your head, is there the thought process of dropping early if it is not right now? Or is that
where I am at in my life and in my career right now with BTL, with a number of other things that I have going on? That is 100% an option. And before I sign or do any contracts with sponsors this year, I'll have that conversation with them, whether it's they're like, hey, no, you offer a great platform and you're visible in a number of other ways. The fishing is just one of them. We're good the rest of the year. You do what you want. Or yeah, if I fish 60% of the year, I'll give you 40% back. Or if I fish 40% of the year, I'll give you 60% back. That's something new that I'll definitely have in place going into 2024.
Got it. I mean, dude, I think that's a reasonable mindset and a reasonable thing to consider, right? Like sponsors in this industry know how expensive this is.
And especially at the open level, it's a pay to play level. You're not qualified for anything. You're not owed anything. I mean, the only reason you're in it is because you happen to know when to register at the right time to get into the dang things.
Right. It's
zero skill set involved. Zero skill set involved in fishing a Bassmaster Open. Right.
Like now, if you have never fished a tournament before and this and that, it probably doesn't make sense to do that. But it's the open to, if you are financially well off and you're like, I want to go try it, but you've never been in a bass boat and this and that, like technically that person could sign up.
Yeah. So, I mean, dude, I think it's great. Like, let's say you picked up tournament fishing, you're listening to your show, to Serious Angler, to BTL, you're watching some of the live stuff. You're like, I want a piece of that. I want to get into it. I'd recommend it'd be cool. Your very first one, you either sign up as a marshal for the Elite Series or you fish as a co-angler in the Bassmaster Opens, and you sit there and have zero expectation to catch a single fish. And you're like, okay, this is what the goal is. Then you go back, you deconstruct it, you start at the club level, and you start fishing as a co-angler at the club and start that process of working your way up.
Yeah. Dude, no, I've always thought it's something I didn't do this year. So I moved from Colorado to Idaho through all of this, but like something that I didn't do this year that I've kind of had in my mindset the last couple of years is I've transitioned to the boater side and the Toyota Series the last couple of years. And I've always said, and I've picked things up from doing this, fishing a Toyota Series or an Opens as a co-angler, I normally would pick a couple. Now I'm to the point where I want to do one a year, just outside of my comfort zone. I've never fished in Florida, right? Like that didn't happen this year, but it's like next year, I'd like to do something like that from that learning standpoint. I've even gone as far as thinking this is like, man, the fishing as a co-angler is it's brutal to me, especially if you run a boat and are on the boater side and then you fish as a co-angler. Like there's a lot that's not in your hands. So huge props to guys who are consistent and do well at it. I view it as a learning deal, but it's like going back to your point of cost here, I've talked about this. It's like, is it more effective to build relationships with the guys that are fishing these events and literally flying in and being like, dude, can I just hop in the boat with you for 5 days of practice and then flying home? Like not even fishing the actual event, but learning how these guys break down events.
Yeah, if it's legal, if you can be in a if you can
right.
be in the
if
boat.
If you're a
during
media
that, yeah.
guy, right?
Yeah.
Or if whatever, however you can do that. But just thinking through that, it's like, man, that wouldn't be a bad way to learn some of this stuff too. I don't know.
No, that's true. But yeah, a cost effective learning. Like if in 2024 you're gonna dedicate $10,000 to becoming a better angler, it's less than $1,000 a month.
Right.
Are you
it's
gonna
something
do
you
that?
enjoy, you love,
Yeah.
like that's right.
Are you gonna do that by fishing locally? Are you gonna do that by fishing couple major tournaments nationally? Are you going to do that by investing in technology for your boat? Are you going to do that in, hey, I'm going to fish every single Wednesday nighter and learn my local lake better than anybody else and become an expert on one lake? Like there's so many different ways that you could do that cost-effective learning.
Yeah, dude, I like that mindset. I really do. It makes me think through of like 2024, what are my plans? Like, and thinking through that is a good way to look at it, is more of this cost effective analysis of things. And it's like, you're dead on. I mean, this is kind of the first year where I'm in the green from a couple of good finishes, one at the Delta and like those kinds of things, and going to fish the Tortoise Series Championship at Table Rock on a higher level than like the local stuff. And it's, you can't bank on those top tens or those higher finishing checks with it.
And obviously you wanted to make the Toyota Championship when you started the year. But at the beginning of the year, you're like, oh, that's a no entry fee. That's a free tournament.
Right.
But how much are you in to go fish this free tournament from Idaho to go to Missouri and all the I mean, you're still in. So let's say you're in the green now. Well, you're $2,500 in before you even make a cast in this free tournament that you're about to fish.
And the payout is phenomenal in the top couple places, but man, it drops off quick, right? And I think the one thing, going back to the odds thing, something that I've always viewed as a positive at the Toyota Series Championship is that $10,000 payout from your region, right? Like if that's a 1 in 25 shot to for that 10 grand. So like that's big to me. But you're right. Like I'm looking at this, like this is technically a free tournament. I'm truck bed camping at this tournament. So like there's a cost savings. I'm stopping at my parents' house in Colorado on my way down. So that's another day of saved lodging. Okay. But yeah, I'm looking at $2 grand in fuel essentially to get there, practice. And I was like considering, part of my head was like, maybe it makes sense to go pre-practice this one. That's cut off since moving to Idaho. Like that's an additional expense that I'm not going to do. So it's like, yeah, I'm looking at a solid $2 grand into this. I think that still puts me on the green on the year, but it's like, you're right. Like that stuff is like, it's like a gambling. It's like, all right, do we leave now? Do we put the chips off the table for the year? Or do you go in again? Like,
and here's the other thing that I do that is probably not, I mean, it just depends. I said, I'm not a financial guru on this. I'm just trying to get my way through this to make the Elite Series. This is just what works for me.
Yeah.
But I don't put it on credit cards at all. Right. Like I don't use a credit card. I use a debit card.
Okay.
So I am only spending money that I actually have in my account, which makes it really stressful. I mean, I have like an emergency card with a really low limit, but it makes it really stressful because you're actually seeing, it's not a deal where you're like, but it makes it incredibly amazing on the back end, like we're right now, because I'm not looking at this going, oh my God, I have $25,000 from this past year that I haven't paid off that made it look like I had money all throughout the year. But now I'm in this massive hole afterwards that so many of these guys find themselves in with credit card debt. So that's a big give and take. It's more stress during the season and you're on a tighter budget during the season, but on the back end and going into the next year, you're not 6 feet under.
Right. Well, dude, I mean, that's like that's being real smart with it. And I think like you can do, you know, each person has their own mindset and their thought process on the credit card way and this and that. And you can certainly run credit cards responsibly too.
Oh
But
yeah,
like
and it makes sense because you get percents back and you get savings and you get points and mileage and all this stuff. So yeah, I probably should, if you ask a financial guy, be running it on a credit card that I'm earning something back for.
But to your point, the simplicity and to say, I know I'm safe because here's my number. I think there's a lot of merit in that too. So I think it's a bad system. I think that's cool that you're doing it that way because you're exactly right. Too many people get down the road of get to a point where it's like, man, how did I end up with $15,000 in debt off of this quick couple of weeks, right? A fish in the opens.
Yeah. I mean, dude, think about that. You do that first one and you suck it up and you're paying everything out of your pocket. You just fished 2 days on Okeechobee and you're 7,500 in the hole.
Right. And Matt, we're not including any of this. And this is including with my numbers. I was talking about this with my dad the other day. I'm like, well, I'm in the green this year. It's like, okay, what about, you know, you're still having to have a very expensive boat to fish this stuff. Like you're not including if there's a boat
I'm not
payment.
Including any of the boat payment, truck payment, anything. This
like,
is straight
this
up.
This is just
like,
the numbers right now.
That's what I said. Someone's going to be like, well, what about depreciation and what about like mileage per blah, blah, blah. And I'm saying these are just the actual numbers that I'm going to see right now from this one decision coming out of my pocket. And I'm also in a position, you know, with BTL where, I mean, dude, if I had to bust open a brand new spool of shooter every time that I was paying full retail for, like I wouldn't be respooling as often as I am,
you feel
or
like you need to be,
you know, rods and reels that I have with Denali and stuff. I mean, there's a bunch of things that make it easier for me to do all this. And I'm still, you know, that I didn't include any of that stuff in here. Rods, reels, tackle, any of that stuff. Rods, reels, line, all that involves
your capital expenses, the stuff that you have to do it.
Another one that's typical is, you know, like I'll probably have to buy an east chip or a southeast chip or whatever chip that is down there. And of course I'm going to get the top of the line. That's going to be another $250.
Yeah. And then, dude, no, the chip stuff is, all that stuff eats you. And then of course a new one comes out and then it's like crap. Like, Well, dude, I think this is a good breakdown for people and kind of as this is good timing, just being the schedules have recently been released. People are kind of going through their decisions. Maybe it's a guy like you're saying, who's like, hey, how do I get into this? I think the biggest message and takeaway I'm taking from this, Matt, is and I forgot the term you were using it for, but the learning, like calculated
cost-effective learning.
Cost-effective learning. There you go. I like that. I think that's a good way to kind of wrap things up here. Anything from BTL coming in the next couple of weeks you want to, I guess, talk about? Any cool shows you've got lined up?
Yeah, I'm actually going to spend a lot of the month of November. We're going to do a whole week with Ken Duke, and there was a little bit of a controversy. Basically, Timmy Horton a couple months ago came out with a deal that in his all-time greats, he put Jacob.
I listened to this show. Oh yeah.
And then I had Ken on, and I was like, dude, we need to actually, you know, there hasn't really been anything like that since the greatest angler debate back in like the early 2000s, I think, when Rick Clunn was named by it. But I'm going to have Ken Duke on. And we're going to spend a whole week of actually developing a criteria of how you judge how good an angler is at the top level of professional bass fishing. I'm going to have Wheelers agreed to come on, some of the older guys, some of the younger guys. We're going to dive into that discussion in November of the off season and actually come up with the 10 greatest professional bass anglers of all time, according to this criteria.
Yeah. Love it, man. Dude, that'll be a sweet breakdown, and I'm sure there'll be some hot takes, and that's what makes it fun, right? Is like everyone has their own criteria, and I'm sure people are like, oh, you know, that's BS. That shouldn't count in this criteria. So it'll be cool though to have you and Ken break through that because you two both know just the history and the level of.
He has a formula. So like, I mean, I've talked to him about it. He called me up. He's like, dude, you'll never believe where this angler is or where this angler is. He has a formula. He's described values to each accomplishment. You plug your guy in, it shows you where he is. I think he's done the top 300 so far.
I like it. I like it. Awesome. All right, Panger. Well, dude, I'll get out of here. Let you get on with your day. I appreciate you coming on, talking through everything. Opens and expenses for what it costs to do this stuff. I like your mindset in all of this, man, and always be rooting for you, watching the Opens and whatnot.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it, man.
All right, we'll catch you later.
See ya.